Hey everyone, the name is Erik THor, and welcome to today's live stream. Today's live stream is on laziness and why we are inclined to be lazy. And I've always had this kind of lazy brain theory. Like, I've always had the idea that there is a part of me that wants to take things very slow. There is a part of me that wants to procrastinate. There's a part of me that wants to stereotype. There's a part that wants to just do things as easy as possible. And easy is generally kind of the opposite of fun. Like, if you have fun in one corner and you have easy, there is only one commonality between the two. Easy and fun are usually effortless. When you're trying to have fun, or when you're trying to take it easy or to do something in an easy way, both of the times you'll experience one thing: it's effortless. I can just have fun, I can just express myself, I don't have to try, I don't have to force myself, I can just go and do it. And that's why I think laziness is so appealing. It might not be fun to be lazy. I mean, who is really having fun while they're just browsing Netflix for hours and hours? Who actually has fun while they're just casually browsing down their phone over and over? Who is actually enjoying themselves when they're sitting and I don't know what you do on Tinder? Who is actually enjoying themselves while they're being lazy? It's very hard to enjoy yourself while being lazy. Fun is when you're doing something that is easy and that you're enjoying. Lazy is when you're doing something that is easy but boring. So easy is mundane, lazy is mundane. That's a very important part of it. I believe that laziness is found in the tertiary function. In the Myers-Briggs terminology, there is something called the tertiary function. The Myers-Briggs personality theory, it doesn't just try to describe your personality, it's also trying to describe what's going on inside your head. It's making an effort to be kind of a theory of the human mind. So it has these ideas that there are cognitive functions, there are processes in the brain. You have your dominant processes that are fun and easy to engage in. Your dominant processes are always on. Your dominant process is always something you find interesting, always something that you like to do, always something that you will just have there. You don't have to actually do something. It's not hard to use the dominant function. The tertiary shares this thing. It's easy to use. That's why we use it so often. People tend to say that the tertiary is something we are inclined to pull on and to use all the time. And sometimes they say people get stuck in loops between their dominant and their tertiary because they're so inclined on doing things that are easy. The person that is in a dominant and tertiary loop is always trying to do things that are easy. It should require as little effort as possible. You should just go into the process. You should just have it there. You shouldn't have to actually do anything. So there are two other processes that you want to think about in relation to laziness. There is the auxiliary process, and the auxiliary process is really difficult. People go into the auxiliary and they do it quite a lot, and it's very often associated with growth, because when you go into your auxiliary, when you go into your second function, you're actually putting yourself in a state of inspiration and vulnerability. You're putting yourself out there, or you're doing something that doesn't come easy to you, but you're doing it because you find it fun and meaningful and worthwhile. The auxiliary is associated with something worthwhile and something meaningful. It's good to go out and talk with people. It's good to connect. It's good to share. It's good to manage people. It's good to go into it. You have these ideas in your head of what is good to do, what is nice to do. Sometimes the auxiliary is connected to the superego. Some people believe that it's the good parent or the good mother, or that it's like our instinct of what we should do, you know. So the auxiliary is almost perfectly balanced by the tertiary, because the tertiary is often referenced as the child that just wants to have fun, the child that just wants to do. Is everything working? Just making a quick check. Is everything working fine where you all are? Keep getting a message that it's not working and that it stopped. Okay, now I see green. Now everything looks fine. Perfect, perfect. Okay. So what I was saying is the tertiary is perfectly balanced against the auxiliary, because the auxiliary is something that you can just engage in, that you have to like push yourself to engage in. And I see sometimes people are like in this superego slave mentality where you're constantly pushing yourself to do everything you do. You're always forcing yourself to do it. I have to do it. It's so important to do it. I really should be doing this. I really need to do this. I really need to complete this. You know, you're giving yourself this kind of pep talk. You're telling yourself, oh, it's so important. I really need to get this on. I really need to do this in time. I really need to do this well. And that's how we tend to look at the auxiliary. The auxiliary is associated with a bit of pressure and a bit of force and a bit of stress. And it's almost like an external voice. You know, the auxiliary can be like a voice in your head. It's not your own voice. That's the thing with the auxiliary. The weird thing about the auxiliary is that it's not your own voice. It's what you think everyone else thinks you should be doing. It's, oh, people think I need to do this, or people need this, or I need to do this for other people, or I need to do this because other people say it's the good thing to do, or because the system demands it, or because it's such an important thing. You know, it's an it's perceived as something that comes from the outside. It's outside pressure. The dominant is just something natural and effortless. It's no pressure. It's easy to engage in. It's just who we are, you know. It's your own voice, it's your own thoughts, it's what you like to do, it's what you tend to do when you're at your own when you're in charge of yourself, and when you're doing things you like, and when you're doing things that come easy to you. But the auxiliary is associated with pressure, and it's fun pressure, but it's still pressure. It's fun pressure in the sense that you do tend to find it so rewarding. Like when people engage in the auxiliary, or like when they go into these inspiring functions, as I tend to call them, they're putting themselves in situations that are slightly outside their comfort zone, but they're still feeling like they're doing something important. Every time we do it, we get this feedback, like I'm doing something fun, I'm doing something in line with my interests, I'm doing something that I enjoy, I'm doing something that I think is good, that aligns with my values. So that's the appeal of the superego, or of the inspiring functions. The inspiring functions are encouraging because while they are hard, they are also telling you you're doing something good. They're saying, good job, that's great, that's really good, that's really interesting, that's really fascinating. So for me as an INFJ, it's like when I go into and explore possibilities, or when I go into and start thinking outside my normal tracks. You know, if my mind has tracks and it has like these things that goes outside or goes in circles around sometimes, and if it has these patterns, and if it has this process to it, when I go into an ENFP state almost, or an inspired state, it's suddenly filling myself up with possibilities. It's suddenly considering options I previously ruled out. It is suddenly putting myself out there and expressing my truth and speaking about how I feel. It is allowing myself to care or to feel passionate about something, even if people might think it's weird. And it's putting myself in a vulnerable position. When you go into your inspired functions, you're putting yourself in a vulnerable position. So that's why a lot of people, they float with their dominant functions. They're in their natural state. They do things that, come effortless to them, and then they start like they get into this week, this really great week where they're like pushing themselves and they're doing a lot of great things and they're like standing up for themselves and like they're really going outside their comfort zone and putting themselves out there. And yeah, of course I'm speaking from the introverted perspective here, putting yourself out there. And it can last for a little bit, but then we start getting insecure. And the stress starts getting too much and we start feeling a little bit anxious, a little bit like, oh, what am I doing? Is this really good? Am I really doing the right thing? What if people hate me while I do it? What if everyone is judging me for it? What if everyone is thinking I'm an idiot? When you're in it for a little bit, you can start to amp up stress and anxiety, and you can start like maybe somebody says something that hurts you, or maybe you get a negative comment, or maybe you get a bad pattern, or maybe you make a mistake, or maybe an option you considered turned out to be total bullshit. And you get very easily discouraged when you're using your auxiliary. So that's the core problem of it. We get discouraged by using the auxiliary when it doesn't work, and so we can be encouraged to go into the tertiary and to be lazy because there is no discouragement. There is nothing discouraging about it. You can just be in it. There's no problem, nothing to worry about. But this, of course, is perhaps the greatest inhibitor of growth, because it also feeds into a sense of powerlessness. There is no stress in the tertiary. There is no anxiety in the tertiary. The tertiary is built to shield us from stress and anxiety. All those things we normally care about, all those things we normally find to be important, we just hide. If we just hide from it, there is no disappointment and there is nothing, no stress. We don't have to worry anymore. So that lots of people, they go into this state where they're like, oh, I don't want to care anymore. I don't care anymore. I don't have any emotions anymore. They freeze up and they stop themselves. And I want to put this into context because I tell you, like, as an introvert, going into the inspiring functions, it's putting yourself out there. But I say that as an introvert, and then I realized, of course, as an extrovert, it's the other way around. The introverted side is associated with yourself, with your identity, with your home, with the things you normally think about, with the things you feel responsible for, with the things you align with yourself. The extroverted functions, they're more aligned with what you think about your surroundings, what you think about new experiences, what you think about the people and about the community and about the world around you at large. So we have these two conceptions. We have the introverted conception, which is how do I dress, what do I say, what do I do, how do I handle these situations? And you notice introverts are often very me focused. How can I take responsibility? What can I say? What can I do to make it better? Where extroverts tend to be very world-oriented. So what can we as the people do? What can the world say about this? What can nature tell us about this? What can life tell us about this? What can the world around us say about this? What does the world show us? What do our cards say? What does the objective reality say? So extroverts, they have this and this is also very defining for like ENFPs and ENTPs, for example. A lot of ENFPs and ENTPs, they come to me and they say, Erik, I'm actually quite theoretical and I love theory. I love theories and exploring theories and like so on and so forth. But what I realize is very few ENFPs or ENTPs would trust theory. They would say it's just a theory. they would say, oh, it's just something funny I read. You know, they wouldn't actually combine it or connect it to self. You know, as an INFJ, something I noticed is it's not just a theory to me, it's my theory. And so it's an extension of myself and what I think. And so if my theory is proven wrong, I am proven wrong. Myself is proven wrong. So it's connected to self and to my sense of self. And everyone has connected their sense of self to something. You can connect your sense of self to your thoughts and your theories, or to something like that. Or you can connect yourself to your surroundings and where you've been and who you've talked to and who you know and who you met, and like all those things. You know, extroverts tend to have a very like interesting way to develop ego. They often do it by studying who they are in relation to other people. That person tends to be like that, but I am different, I'm like this. Extroverts tend to have this view where they focus very often on what they think about the world around them in comparison to themselves. So their self is their thoughts about their surroundings. And I'm gonna connect this to the autopilot in just a second. Yeah, I sometimes call the lazy self or the tertiary self the autopilot. I like that term, because when we're in the tertiary, we are often not even realizing what we're doing. You know, I don't have a problem with people watching Netflix. I watch Netflix myself. I don't have a problem with people playing video games. I don't have a problem with, like, you know, people who do these things. I don't think there's something wrong with that. What I think is something wrong is when we do these things in autopilot. When we're watching Netflix but we're not really paying attention. When we're watching the phone and scrolling through things but we're not really listening, or we're not even interested in what we say or what we read. Like, when we're in the autopilot, we're not even taking in any information. We're not interested. We're not even caring about what we're experiencing or what somebody said. Like, somebody can say something really harsh on social media and we're just scrolling it by and we don't even care that they did, or how out of line that was, or how stupid that was. So the autopilot doesn't really care, and it's kind of a zombie state to be in. The crazy thing is, for an introvert, the autopilot is also introverted. For an extrovert, the autopilot is also extroverted. So we don't necessarily notice the switch when we're going into the autopilot, because it still feels like we are in our self. You know, there is a part of ego or of the self that is always growing and changing and adjusting, and then there is a part of the ego or the self that doesn't want to change, that always wants to remain the same, that wants to remain stagnant, that doesn't want any new information, that doesn't want any feedback, because that is all a threat. So you can see extroverts putting themselves in environments and actually avoiding any environment that is in line with their interests or with their feelings. You know, when extroverts want to unwind or just slip into their autopilot, suddenly, like, the ENFP stops caring about patterns, they stop being passionate, they start just doing, and they're like just in their environment, they're just in the zone, they're just doing what they're doing, but there is no passion, there is no pattern, there is no freedom, there is nothing ENFP about it. It's more ESTP, in that it's just the same environment over and over, it's just the same activities over and over, it's just the same people over and over, it's just the same system and the same tasks and the same experiences all over. ENFPs, to remain in flow, actually have to constantly get new information, and I think that goes for everything. To stay in flow, we have to actually always get new information. That goes to whatever type you are. You have to actually get new information, and you have to actually be receptive, and you have to actually listen, you have to actually pay attention, you have to actually be curious. When you're not, you're slipping towards the autopilot. And I want to make a final contrast, and that is to the inferior. people always talk about their dominant and their inferior because they are so aware of it. We're so aware of the dominant and we're so aware of our inferior and how we notice our inferior. But you know, the inferior is easy to notice because we can force its use. You can force yourself to do a lot of things. You can feel forced to do a lot of things. And everything you feel forced to do connects to your inferior functions and to your lost functions. So flip your 4 letters and look at the other 4 of the letters. As an INFP, look at ESTJ. As an ENTP, look at ISFJ. As an ESFJ, look at INTP. That's your inferior functions. That's where they are based. That's where they're located. That's where they like to hang out. So the inferior functions are used through sheer force. You push yourself to be this way. You put on a front. You force yourself. You say, oh, I'm gonna have to do this. I have to do this. So as an INFJ, what I do is I SP things. I rush things. As an INFJ, something I do is I force myself to be tough and to not be sensitive and to put on a strong front. As an INFJ, I force myself into thinking and perceiving and to think tactically about things. I feel forced to do so. So when people complain that I use the inferior and they tell me, Erik, stop rushing or so on, it's like I can react and get almost defensive because I'm not using it on free will. I'm not doing it because I want to do it. I'm doing it because I have to. Because they were stressing me, because they were pushing me, because they made me feel forced to, because my environment made me feel forced to. So the trap of the inferior is we feel forced to use it by our environment. We feel forced because of circumstance. You have these people in life that always defend themselves. They're always so defensive. They're always so... they're behaving really badly and really recklessly, and they never take responsibility for anything because they're always in their inferior. They're always in force mode. They're never doing anything because they love it or because they like it or because they enjoy it or because it's what they want to do. They only do it because they think that's how the world is and that's what the world demands. So you have to be very careful for that. When you notice people in force mode, get them to relax, get them to tune into their interests, get them to slow down and start asking, okay, so what would you like to do then if you could? That's the question. What would you like to do then? Nafil asks, is it natural for introverts to be insecure in social situations? Martin says, I wouldn't think that, Nafil, but I think factors depend on an introvert's environment, but extroverts can also be insecure. Yeah, I think insecurity can either be anxiety or it can be a lack of confidence, of course. But either way, it I think relates to our ability to be vulnerable and to put ourselves out there. The more you can put yourself out there and develop your inspiring functions and your auxiliary, the more confident you're gonna get and the more secure you're gonna be even when you're accessing these functions. You're gonna be able to, and you want to be able to do this, get into your inspired state and to maintain that and to be in that without worry. What you'll also want to do is when you look at the inferior, because that's where you often see the most insecurity. We feel forced to do a lot of things because of our environment and because of other people and because we assume that we can't resist or because we assume that we are not able to stand up for ourselves. A lot of the evil that goes on in the world happens because people feel powerless to be good. They don't feel they have the power to be good. You know, people assume you need power to be good, but it's easy to be evil. You know, it's easy to just obey orders, easy to just do the wrong thing, easy to just act against your own interests. It's hard to act in your interest. It's hard to do what you value, but it's easy to do what you hate, and that's not really true. I think everyone who thinks that way should flip it. When you're in your inferior, honestly, everything you're constantly thinking about is, how can I do what I love? Why can't I do what I love? You know, there can be a sense of frustration almost in that, when we feel like we're cut off from ourselves, when we're not having time to do what we love, when we're not getting to do what we like. There comes a point where everyone in this state starts to get really frustrated, really upset, you know, because you're in a state you don't enjoy and you're doing things you hate. And you're starting to feel upset because yeah, it gets to the point where you start to wonder, like, what is then the point of living? What's then the point of doing what I'm doing if I'm not doing what I love? So we get these lash outs, and I think they're very important to remind ourselves of what we really do want. At some point you have to sit down, and I've had this sit down chat with people many times in my life, when I found myself doing all the wrong things, or getting into bad situations, or feeling cornered, or feeling powerless, and I ended up lashing out. And you know, you feel very bad when you lash out, and you of course you're not yourself, and you're not like being you. But you also get to the point where people realize that, yeah, something has to change. They realize it and you realize it. And so these smaller explosions can be very necessary to grow as a person and to move forward in life. So I'm gonna end this stream, and I want to thank everyone for joining in. I've started just trying to do these things to try out live streaming, and because most of my videos are just one monologue anyways, and because it's nice to have people joining up and commenting and sharing. I hope you all enjoyed it, and thank you all for tuning in, and I hope to see you all in the next video.